What's up, everybody? Once again, it is I, James, coming to you from the Nerdy Musings Podcast studio. Today, I am very excited to be joined by Mr. Rohan from Back in the Game Comics. How you doing tonight, brother?
I'm doing good, man. How you doing?
Awesome, doing great, and I feel like we kind of run in some of the same circles with the online community, the YouTube comic collecting nerds and everything.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, for sure. I mean, first off, we're both Washingtonians.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but I mean, that's how I found you. Is you recorded with a couple of buddies of mine, Dan and
Yep,
Ryan, and
yep,
then I've watched some other episodes, and I was like, oh, this guy's from Washington. Yeah,
yeah,
we got to connect here. So here we are.
yeah. It was actually really cool. I ran into Dan down at Rose City Comic Con
Oh,
this
okay.
year.
I know we met a bunch of people. So cool. Right
Yeah,
on.
and then it was funny. We were standing at a one of the vendors. My wife and I were digging through long boxes, and I hear this voice, and she heard it too. And she kind of looks. She's like, "That voice sounds familiar." And then I look over, and it's Mike from Lunch Money Comics.
Nice, 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 nice.
Like, wow, what a small world.
Did Dan tell you how we all met up at Turficon?
He didn't tell me, but I saw a lot of your guys' pictures and things. It
Okay,
just
yeah.
looked like you guys had a blast.
Oh yeah, it was excellent. Yeah, for sure.
It's very cool. It's cool when with all the technology, we get to interact online and everything with each other. But when you actually get to meet each other in person, it's just really special. Especially after building these kind of relationships and things, you kind of finally get to meet the people in real life. It's always a
Yeah,
neat experience.
it really is, and like you think about it, like in truth, like it is really easy to bond and connect with people online when you don't get the full version of
Yeah,
people, right? And so
curated. You get the curated version.
exactly right, but like when we all like, I mean, there was 9 of us essentially that met up, and I mean, you would have thought we've been friends for forever. Like it just
Yeah.
like nothing changed. It was awesome.
Yeah, just seeing your guys' pictures and the posts on Instagram and everything, I could really pick up on that. Just
Yeah,
that natural chemistry was there right away,
yeah,
and yeah, didn't you guys like get to have breakfast with Walt
yeah.
Simonson or something? I mean,
Yeah,
dude,
both Saturday and Sunday, we had breakfast with Walt Simonson,
that's
yeah.
insane, man.
Yeah, it was
See,
pretty
even he
sweet.
felt the love and the
Well,
positivity of the group.
that's what's funny, like, when I came home and I was, like, telling my wife this story, and then, like, especially when it worked out the 2nd day
Yeah.
that we she's like, "Are you sure you didn't just bother this guy? He was, he's" and I was like, "No," because like, at the end, when we were taking a group photo, he ran back to get in the group photo. I was like, he gave me his email address to, like, exchange photos with
That's
and things like that. So
amazing.
I was like, so I think he was pretty genuinely into it and having a good time.
Yeah. Yeah, he was
Not that I
down.
like him now regularly chatting with him, but, like, I think for that
Blowing up his
weekend
email.
yeah, for that weekend, we had a good time hanging out together.
Yeah, it's cool. In my experience, so many of these creators are just very approachable and down to earth. Like in anything you have, your ones where you have a bad experience, but as far as in comics, like I think I've got a pretty good rate of where I've met these people and they seem very genuine, very approachable and down to earth. Like you have your select handful out there that within the community are kind of like not as into those fan interactions. But I would say for the most part, there you hear a lot of things like that, especially with certain people like Walt. And I know Todd McFarlane always goes out of his way to
Yeah.
to take time with people and
I'll actually add to that. Like I'm in the same vein as you. I've never had a bad experience in that kind of moment. And at Turficon, one of the artists that I met was Adam Hughes, and
oh
I had heard
yeah,
from numerous people that he's kind of a grumpy guy.
right.
In my experience, he couldn't have been nicer. And
Yeah.
the thing is we actually ran into him again off the con floor, and he was equally
Yeah.
nice and genuine. So like, I have not a bad word to say about him. Where I know other people's have had different stories.
Yeah, I'd heard the same thing about Bart Sears way back in the day, and when I interacted with him at a con, he was totally awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and he's actually going to be coming on here
Oh,
probably within the next couple of months.
look
I've
at
been
that.
chatting back and forth with his wife. She
Oh,
coordinates everything for him. He's a busy dude, but
very cool. Very cool.
yeah, yeah. So I'm looking forward to catching up with him. Yeah, I think with those interactions, man, it's one of these things where yeah, maybe the person's not friendly, but maybe you just caught them on a bad day too. Like you just never
Not
know.
Not to mention, like, you've got to give him a little grace in the sense that, like, I mean, yes, it's cool to, like, have a lot of fans, but, like, when you're that artist or writer or whatever, you gotta imagine sometimes those weekends could probably be very tough.
Oh yeah,
You know what I
they're
mean?
they're a grind.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have a few friends that are on the higher end of the spectrum as far as, superstardom as artists, and I know kind of how grueling that is on them from
Mhm.
talking to them. And just, yeah, the fact that they can keep it together at all amazes me at sometimes, because
Yeah.
there's so much. And if they're doing commissions and stuff and sitting there being watched perform, while they do their artwork, and it's just like all these layers of pressure that have to be there. I'm sure, they might be used to it, but it has to be a little bit mentally draining.
Yeah. No, 100%. 100%.
So I wanted to chat a little bit about, your Instagram handle is Back in the Game Comics, which implies you got out of the game at some point. So why don't you take me all the way back when you first started collecting comics? Let's chat a little bit about what you were into, kind of what years that was in and everything, and then what led to you taking a break, and then making your glorious comeback and getting
Yeah.
back into the very addictive habit of collecting comics.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think like almost everyone that I talk to on a regular basis, I am a '90s kid. I mean, I was born in the '80s, but like my childhood was the '90s,
Yeah.
and so I was into the '90s, all that stuff, just like I feel like a lot of us were. And so for me, my gateway in was those kind of Series One, Series Two, Series Three Marvel cards from 1990, 1991,
Okay.
92.
So yeah, I saw you mentioned cards on one of your things on Instagram. So
Yeah, exactly, right, and so I don't even honestly remember who or how we got introduced to those cards, but we came across them, and then I thought they were really cool at the time,
yeah,
and I used to just if you I don't know if you remember, like, but the backs of those cards have
I remember.
bios
My
and stuff.
brother, I remember.
Yeah.
I still have them, and I still look at them quite often.
Yeah, well, they have those bios, so it's like on the back of the card, you'd get an entire kind of history breakdown of Spider-Man, and then
Yeah,
I especially loved Series 2 and Series 3 because they had the power ratings and things like that.
exactly.
So that was my entry point, and then I obviously bridged into comics. And so at that time, like, it wasn't like I was an avid reader of comics. Like, we collected some, and then we collected
Hmm.
my brother and I, we collected that Series 1, Series 2, Series 3 complete, and then there was also a 92 Jim Lee X-Men set that we collected complete. So at that time, and then you come that connects with the Spider-Man cartoon, the X-Men cartoon, the Batman animated series. I also used to love like the Fantastic Four cartoon, the Iron Man
Yeah.
cartoon. So it's just kind of all of that kind of mix had me fall in love with the characters. Right? Again,
Was
not being
it was your gateway?
yeah, and
Yeah.
again, not being the biggest comic book reader, I honestly can't talk to people when people are like, "Oh, I love the Chris Claremont run of
Yeah. See, I'm a
X-Men."
I'm a art guy. I follow the artist on the
Exactly,
comics.
right? So, like,
Yeah.
with those comics, like, the ones we always collected was Jim Lee X-Men and Todd McFarlane Spider-Man,
Yeah.
right? I think just like all the '90s
You
kids.
probably have a long box with about 20 issue ones of X-Men as
You know,
well.
I actually I don't have any of the comics
Okay, okay.
from that age. I am one, like, when I move on, I move on, but in terms of, like,
Gotcha.
what happened, I mean, I think just age, and then, like, I got more into sports, and so from the collecting side of things, we switched from comics, I do have those cards still in a binder here, but I don't have
Right.
any of the comics, but we switched to sports cards. And sports to this day is still one of the biggest, if not the biggest hobby in my life. However, I
Okay.
don't collect anything sports related. Like, but as a kid, I kind of evolved into sports cards, and that lasted a couple years. And then from there, it was just kind of got into upper middle school, high school, just
Mhm.
got distracted with other things and got away from it. That being said, as high school progressed into college and the X-Men movies first came out, the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man movies came out, I still very much loved the characters. I still very much remembered the storylines from what I remembered as a childhood. So I
Right.
was very into those things. And then even when the MCU started, I would be there, any movie related, Batman, Spider-Man, Wolverine, or X-Men, whatever it is, I would always go. And I always loved seeing them. I wanted to see more of them. That didn't get me into collecting though, but I still just loved seeing and watching and hearing again about these things. What got me back into collecting, so it was during the pandemic, which I'm sure a lot of people got back into
Oh
collecting.
yeah.
But if you remember the kind of rise of the NFT,
Mm-hmm.
not that I'm a big crypto guy, but
Yeah.
one day my brother and I have this text with my brother and a couple of our cousins, and he was like, "Oh, I'm gonna buy this NFT," and I was like, "What NFT?" And I looked at what he posted in the text thread, and it was a copy of FF5, so First Doctor Doom. And
Oh,
I was like
interesting.
I was like, it's on that VV app if you've ever heard of it.
Okay.
I was like, "Oh, that's kinda cool." And at the time, the peak NFTs, I was like, "Oh, what's this crazy thing gonna cost?" Right? And I
Mhm.
was like, "What does this cost?" And he said $6. I was like, "Oh, that's
Okay.
not bad. That could be kind of fun." So I was like, "I'll try and get one." And so then I started slowly collecting these VV NFTs, and it got me collecting comics, but in the digital form.
Wow, so I didn't even know people were doing that with comics.
Yeah, yeah, and the VV is still out there. The value of the NFTs
Oh,
have
yeah.
crashed along with all other NFTs for the
Yep.
most part. But that kinda got me, and so I amassed a not a small collection, but I had a good co and it was kind of fun. I was having a good time. I was like, "This comics is pretty cool." It started kinda getting me looking into comics again in general. And then one day I think it was like a rainy day, and we took our kids to the mall to take them to one of those play places to kinda
Mhm.
get out some energy.
Yeah.
And it was on the second floor. On the first floor, there was a comic book shop. And I was just like, "Hey, you know what? I'm just gonna swing down in there while they're playing just to take a peek."
Right.
So I rolled down in, and it was only a modern comic shop. So I didn't know any of the stuff that was in. I mean,
Mhm.
obviously there was the Spider-Man comics, but like I don't know the current storylines or anything like that.
Yeah.
And so I just kind of asked the gal that was working there, I said, "Hey, do you guys have like kind of any of the older stuff?" Because I was thinking back to like when I was a kid, there was this comic book store called O'Larry's, and they had like just long boxes of
Dude,
back
me and
issues.
my wife went to O'Leary's so much, like, when we were dating,
Yeah, in Lakewood.
we would go to because she lived out in Lakewood.
Okay,
Well,
that's where
she
I'm from.
technically, she was out in Stillicum, so,
Okay.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, so
it wouldn't be surprising if we crossed paths at some point.
yeah,
'Cause I used to work out there at Pierce College in Stillicum. I ran the multimedia lab out there.
oh, okay.
So, like, I was always around that area, and I would always run over to O'Leary's and stuff.
Okay, yeah, the funny story I always like to think about is when I think back of, my childhood is that my parents would need to go, like, run errands for, let's just say, 2 hours,
Yeah.
and depending on whether it was the years we were in the comics and cards or when it was in the sports cards, they would just drop us off at these shops
Yeah,
for 2 and, like, I'm, like, 7 years I got no money, right? So you can
right.
imagine, like, a store owner be like, "Who are these kids? They got no money." And I'm just sitting
Yep.
there just, like, looking around, asking
Touching
questions,
everything.
touching everything. Yeah. Anyway, so, speed back up. I was like,
Yeah,
I was thinking about that kind of shop. And she was like, "No, you wanna go to Ancient Comics is the only one around that I know of." And I was like, "Okay." So I looked it up on my phone. It was like 20 minutes away. And so I was like, "All right." Afterwards, I was like, when we got home, I was like, "All right, I just wanna run over there. I just wanna check it out." And my wife's
yeah.
like, "Yeah, that's cool." So I rolled over there, and I mean, it just immediately took me back. And I
Yep.
just was like, "Oh, this is awesome." And I actually ended up picking up a couple issues, like one of them being like a Jim Lee X-Men one,
Nice.
just kind of that nostalgic feel.
Exactly, yeah.
And it was. Do you know Ancient Comics at all? Did you know Ancient Comics in Burien?
I never got to check that one out.
Okay, in my opinion, that's the best. He retired now, but that
Okay.
was the best comic shop in this area,
Yeah.
in my opinion. Anyways, the owner Jeff, it's a small shop. I mean, it probably was 400 square feet. He'd
Okay.
been in business for 33 years though, so he started in the 90s.
Wow, so he had a he to keep going for that long, he must have been doing something right. Because
Yeah,
comic shops, as you know,
yeah.
comic shops come and go quite a bit.
Yeah, and anyway, so, like, I was chatting with him on stuff, and there was no one else in the store, so I ended up, like, chatting with him for, I don't know, maybe an hour, and he was like, "If you wanna get back into comics and things like that," he's like, "You can learn a lot on YouTube, just look up
Mhm.
comic book," and I was like, "I've never thought of that." So from there, I ended up looking up things on YouTube, looking up things on Instagram, excuse me, and I was just, like, all in, and I was like,
Yeah.
"Let's do this," and started collecting, and that's
That's
kind of how I
awesome.
got back in. Yeah.
So now you're back in the game, and what do you seek out? Is it all that nostalgia more? It's kind of the stuff you came up on, or are you
You
venturing
know,
out, getting in some older stuff, or
yeah, exactly. So when I first started, and I think there's a natural evolution of everyone that kind of gets back in. Like when you first start, you really truly don't know what you want or what you want to collect or what you like,
yeah,
but you do like a lot of it, and you like it. It's all kind of cool. So like I was buying some older stuff. I was buying a lot of the stuff from the '90s. I was buying even some modern stuff that I heard that had come out. Like, and that was also the end of the pandemic. So like the movie spec stuff was very big. So I was like, oh, I
yeah,
got to get into this movie spec thing, and I was buying just a broad range. And after several months of that, like Dimmer, I was still enjoying it, but I was like, I'm kind of spending a lot of money, but this is kind of all over the place. Like
hmm,
there's no theme here. And so I was like, okay, I need to not spend and try to figure out what I want to do. Thankfully, I found a fairly good trade partner as I started to realize what I was like, and I was able to actually turn over everything I was, for the most part, bought into
oh,
what
that's
I
awesome.
do love to collect. So going back, I told you how my love of the characters came from those cards. Those cards
Hmm.
always had on them the first appearance issues. I'm into history, and
Okay,
so like I love first appearances. The bigger the first appearance, the better. And that's what I wanted to focus on. So in collecting, I collect three things when it comes to comics. Like I would say 75%, if not more, is first appearance issues.
okay,
Um, and then I'll even say, even now, as I've kind of gotten even further along, like I'm almost completely out of the copper. There's only a handful of Bronze Age books I want. My main focus is Silver Age. But with that, I also collect some major kind of first series issues, like
yeah,
Silver Surfer #1, Iron Man #1, Submariner #1, and then the kind of all-time classic covers going back. So like Silver Surfer 4, things of that nature. Those would make up the other like 20 to 25% of
yeah.
my collection, but it's primarily um, those first appearances. My kind of gist with that is I love these characters. I like the history involved with them. So to me, getting the first appearance of them is like owning a piece of history involved with the character.
Oh, for sure.
So that is my main drive. I'm not a volume collector. Um, I have a short box that's not even half full. I have probably less than 40 comics in my
Okay.
entire collection. Um, and now, like when I first started, and I was kind of buying anything and everything, I had two short buy. I had
Yeah, yeah,
probably got up to about 250 comics, and then I was like, okay, let me figure out what I really want to do. And I really figured out like what I kind of honed in on that, and some of these can get pretty up there. So like with trading and things like that, I've gotten down. I'm under 40 books, and I only buy. I mean, I haven't bought. I think I've maybe got 5 comics this year, and even as I like to plan out ahead of time too. So like
right.
I think even next year, I think I have like 3 or 4 books that are on my list.
So you're
Um,
very, very selective with what you
yeah,
get.
yeah, very much so.
Gosh, I wish I had that ability. I'm like my collection, my original collection that I had, I still have, and it's ridiculously. It takes up a ridiculous amount of space, and a lot of long boxes, a lot of short boxes, and now adding to that, I've kind of had to rearrange things. I probably need like another addition on the house
Is it
to
just like
hold
living in
everything.
your garage?
No, no, I have a nice man cave, and my wife helped me rearrange everything. So I actually have a really sturdy metal shelf that holds all the long boxes, but then there's like stacks of the plastic long boxes next to it and stuff all over the place. So, and then I'll
Yeah.
just I'll just randomly find like something tucked away. Like she found in our spare bedroom there was a Rubbermaid tote full of comics that I had
Ah.
forgotten. I'm like, I don't even know where those came from.
Yeah, and I mean, like, I don't have the comics from my as a childhood, although that would have been cool. And so, like, when you think of that part of your collection, right? I know there's like a nostalgic feel to it. So I think I totally get why you hold on
Yeah,
to those, and I think that's very cool. I do think though, when it comes to what you're buying now, I always tell people like you evolve. Even myself, I'll still further evolve. I know for a fact, right?
yeah.
And so, like, you never know which direction you may end up heading. So as long as you enjoy what you're doing in the
For
moment,
sure.
just ride, let it ride.
Yeah, and my goal is to actually part with a lot of them from my old collection because, like you said, tastes change and everything. Like, what got me back into collecting was I was, as somebody who's been a lifelong artist and draws and everything and has maintained that hobby. I started listening to Rob Liefeld's podcast during the pandemic, and he would always talk about Jack Kirby, and I never really like had an appreciation for Jack Kirby like earlier in my art, but now I look at it and I'm just blown away by what he was doing because he like turned his style to abstract and like did all these crazy things that if he were within the confines of doing it correctly, he'd never be able to pull off. So I got back into just Kirby stuff is how I started.
Kirby is my
Yeah.
absolute number one. And I always tell people like the thing that we don't give enough credit, I feel like, to Kirby is the sheer volume of work
Oh
that
yeah.
that guy put out. I mean, when you think about it, right? He was drawing almost every major Silver Age run with the exception of ASM. I mean,
Yeah.
X-Men, Avengers, Hulk, Thor, Fantastic Four, all of those titles he was cranking out. I
Yeah.
mean, and not just like today, like now you have cover artists and he was doing front to back. You know what I'm
Yep.
saying? Like it's incredible to think about the amount of work he was
Yeah,
producing.
it's insane. And, so that's a daunting task trying to get a hold of all the stuff he's done. So that's kind of been my journey is picking up a lot of that stuff within the affordability range that I can get within or that I can justify spending. I've amassed a pretty decent Kirby collection now since I
Wait,
started.
so is the end now? When I use the term end goal, I just think of it as like a direction you're heading. Like
Yeah, yeah.
when it comes to collecting like this, I don't think people always talk about like, oh, I think my collection is complete. I'm always just like, why do we need to think about that? Like,
Yeah, no.
just pick a goal. I get you want a goal and we like to complete goals, but like they're just to kind of help guide our energy as far as
Yep.
I could see. Like I don't look at like this is an end point to my collection because again, I think my tastes are always going to evolve, and
Yeah.
so there's always going to be something else I want to chase, and that may mean I end up not keeping something that I chased a year ago, 2 years ago, or
Right.
whatever time we may be in. But I'm curious. So I was asking. So
No,
is
go
your
for it.
kind of energy directed right now at amassing kind of every
My
Kirby issue?
Yeah, so within the realm of superhero stuff,
Okay.
because as you know, he did a bunch of crazy, like he did
Yeah.
love stories,
Yeah, the cowboy
he
stuff
did the
and
cowboy stuff, like Two Gun Kid and all that. Like he did a bunch of stuff. So yeah, mainly right now, like all his superhero stuff that he did for DC and Marvel, like as much of that as I can find and get good deals on. That's like anytime we've gone to a con, it's really cool because my wife helps me and I print out my list from my collection app of the on the wish list, the ones that I need. So she's digging through boxes. Hey, here's one, here's one. And we kind of tag team it like that when we go to cons. So I ended up picking up a ton of Kirby stuff down at Rose City. There was a
nice.
lot. There
Is
was
there
a couple
any
of vendors that had a ton of Kirby stuff, and they were making all sorts of cool deals on them. So
any specific like runs that are your favorite to go after?
I love the Fantastic Four stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
And
he just
I didn't
and
mention
the
like Silver Surfer is my favorite, so I have a special affinity for FF.
yeah, yeah. So I have that really kind of more obscure trade paperback he did with Stan, the Silver Surfer one.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I have that. I have a lot of the FF stuff and a lot of the Captain America stuff. I think I almost have all his the affordable stuff, not the
I was saying that
not the
Captain
very
America one.
first, not the one from the 40s. Yeah,
Yeah.
not
I have
yet,
I have a
not yet.
picture with a Captain America one. That's about as close as I'll get.
Yeah. Yeah. But I have like a lot of Commandy, a lot of Demon, a lot of Eternals, like all that kind of stuff. So I'm just I'm trying to complete as much of it as I can, but I just love his work. Like I actually flip through them and look at it and everything before I put them back away and have a real appreciation for the artwork as somebody who draws, like knowing the level of mastery it takes to get to a point where you can abstract your style and do what he did, because that's what a lot of people don't realize. You look at his stuff from the 40s and there's like proper correct anatomy and proper faces and everything, and then they look at the other stuff, they're like, this guy sucks. I'm like, no, you don't understand. He removed those limitations from himself to be able to do like astounding, fantastical stuff.
Absolutely. Now, would you ever gravitate towards trying to pick up like a piece of original art by Kirby?
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's my other that's my collecting that I did maintain during the time I wasn't collecting comics. I was collecting original art.
Oh, very cool. So do you have any Kirby stuff?
I don't have any Kirby stuff. I have a lot more modern. So I have a ton of, I probably have about 20 pages from Invincible.
Oh,
So
sick.
Ryan Otley pages. Yeah. Yeah. Did you get into Invincible at all? Do you read it?
I don't read it. I mean,
Okay.
again, I should preface like I'm not. Like I said, I didn't read comics really as a kid. I read the backs of
Yeah.
those cards,
Yeah. And
and so
I didn't really read them either, but Invincible is one of the few that I've read like the
yeah,
entire run.
I have definitely watched both seasons on
Yeah.
Amazon. And I actually have in my sketchbook, I have Ryan Otley sketched
Yeah.
in
Ryan's
Invincible.
awesome.
Yeah, he was a great another great experience
Yeah.
in terms of meeting an artist. Um, Now, would you ever consider? I mean, considering what Kirby pages can go for,
Oh yeah.
would you ever consider like trying to turn your Invincible pages into like a Kirby FF page?
Yeah, I would definitely consider that. It would depend. Like I have some really special Invincible pages that
Mhm.
are like we'll just say that getting in on all of them way before
Yeah.
way before he went to Marvel and got like super duper famous, and way before Invincible became famous with the Amazon show. I have some pretty killer things that I wouldn't be able to afford nowadays.
Yeah,
Like
that's rad. Good for you.
yeah, I have like the double page spread. I'm looking at it right now. It's where they're bursting through the planet.
Oh,
It's like a
sick.
double pager. I have well, my wife's favorite page is the one where he's ate some bad alien food and he's on the toilet. That's actually framed in our bathroom, in our guest
Nice.
bathroom. Yeah. No, I would definitely consider it though. I would definitely work a trade or something, and just to own a piece of history like that,
Yeah.
where literally it's the only one of that thing. I think I was talking with one of the previous guests about that and just how special that makes original art compared to comics. Like obviously there are comics that had low print runs, or they're so old that they're hard to find, in one piece. But with original art, like that's literally the only one of that page that
Yeah,
exists, and they had their hands on it and were the ones working on it.
and it's crazy. And so on our show, we even talked about this with our recent guest. Was he's the guy that currently is a rep for Simone Bianchi. We were talking about how back in the day, no one gave a crap about OA. And
Yeah.
we were talking specifically, and he mentioned, Jack Kirby
Yep.
would just have so much work, and his wife would use the pages to like wipe up coffee stains and
Yeah.
things like that. And it's just,
You would
I mean,
hear
there's that,
crazy
yeah,
stuff.
yeah. And then there's that story of that guy in like 1988 that bought the cover of Giant Size X-Men 1.
Mm-hmm.
He found it for $85 and he got the guy down to $75. And so
Yeah.
could you imagine like
Yeah.
the return on investment? I mean, not that I would want to sell it if I had that
Right.
piece, but like if he did, like good Lord.
Yeah. Yeah. You hear some crazy things too back when like Marvel and DC were just like shredding the
Yeah.
artwork once the issue was out and stuff. And
Yeah, you hear those like stories of those guys that like used to work at like the factory or whatever. And they're like, "Oh yeah, I would just pull this out of the dumpster."
yep. Somebody's gonna find like an envelope full of
Yeah,
stuff one of these days.
yeah,
Yeah, because a lot of Jack's work isn't accounted for. So I
yeah.
mean, they're
A lot of
you
that
know,
from that age and beyond is unaccounted for 100%, right? And a
yeah,
lot of it we know for a fact is destroyed.
yeah,
But I that's why I'm a firm believer in this next like decade, we'll say. Like I think you're gonna see some pretty crazy stuff, and you've already started to see some of it come out, like because we're again, this is not to sound morbid, but we're in that time frame when some of these like baby boomers are starting to pass.
yeah.
And I mean, like that's what happened with the Mile High collection, for example,
Mm-hmm.
or last year the big story was the Fantastic collection. right? There was also towards the end of the year, there was that collection that came about that was every DC book off the newsstand since the start of DC. Like
What's that one that they're like doing the documentary on
that's the
that's supposed to be
Fantastic.
coming? Is that
That's
one?
the
Okay.
Fantastic. Yeah, we actually had Darren on our show and we kind of
Okay,
talked about
cool.
it.
Yeah. I've been following along with that,
Yeah,
trying to see when that's going to premiere and all of that.
it's just now coming out, that documentary.
Okay. Yeah, that looks like a crazy collection.
Yeah, I mean it's like I want to say it's like 300,000 books and just like insane. Like I remember he was saying like his dad had like 16 copies of GSX1 and then so his dad graded nothing. He's been
Yeah.
grading stuff and I think he had like 12 9/8s out of that 16 or
Yeah,
something like that.
some of the stuff I saw in there was at crazy high grades.
Yeah, and then I mean like the top one obviously is the Superman 1, which is it a 7.0 or a 7.5? I can't remember
Yeah, I
what it
think
is.
it's like a 7.5.
Yeah, and then he sold the Batman 1 8.0.
Unbelievable.
Yeah. Yeah.
Unbelievable. Yeah, it's one of these things where you wonder how many things like that are sitting out there somewhere,
No,
like, oh,
absolutely. And that's
your grandpa had comic books, and then
yeah.
your great grandpa had comic books. Here, you want to come and look at them?
Yeah,
And then you're
I
like,
mean,
what?
like, for example, like, Action Comics 1 has 2 graded 9.0s that are, currently the highest graded. However, they say that the Mile High copy, which is ungraded at the moment, is above a 9.0,
Wow.
right? And so you think, right, like, just a couple weeks ago, a Fantastic Four 196, which there's 2 of, no
Hmm.
9/8s, you kinda start to think, like, will a copy come out that could be a 9/8 in the next
Yeah.
decade. Same thing with the AF-15. Like that would be crazy, but I would not rule out the possibility.
Well, and you consider like with a lot of those, like obviously the newsprint makes it difficult to get something in a good quality nowadays because depending on what conditions it's been sitting in. But
Mhm.
I think a lot of people, don't realize that there were larger print runs on a lot of those books, a lot of
Mhm.
the sought after older books. It's just a matter of if they survived the test of time or
Yeah.
if somebody didn't, use them for toilet paper or
Yeah,
whatever.
yeah, yeah. And I mean, I think if you, I know you've had West Coast Dave on your
Yes.
show, and he's even talked about like Washington is actually a great climate for storage of paper, right?
Yeah.
It's not too hot, it's not too cold.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm interested to see over these next years like what will come about.
How I amassed some of the bulk of my collection wasn't through me purchasing all of it. So I had my initial collection, and then I ended up stopping going to shops and things because I used to go to a shop called Comic Book Inc. out in
Mhm.
Tacoma, and I was close with the owner and stuff. So when the shop shut down, it was like like a family member going away or something. It was a real bummer. So I was like, okay, I'm going to stop collecting, and I switched to digital and would look at things on there. But over those years, even when I wasn't going to a shop and collecting, one of my jujitsu students, he loved winning storage unit auctions,
Oh, yeah.
and anytime one would come up with comic books, he would win it, and then he'd be like, "Hey, you want these?" And like there was a couple times where he came with like 6 long boxes to the jiu-jitsu school. He's like, "Here." He's like, "I looked through them a little bit, but I don't know what's in there." So I just when I started collecting again, started going through all of those, and there was some pretty crazy stuff
Nice.
that I didn't even know had been sitting there for like I had those sitting in my storage room for like 6 years and hadn't even gone through them. So I ended up going through all of that and finding some cool things. But yeah, that's a big reason why the collection got so big is like anytime he asked me that, I'm like, sure, I'll take them. Just stick them
I
to the
mean,
side.
for free, yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah. For free or every now and again, for trade for jujitsu lessons to help
Perfect.
with tuition, whatever. And I'm like, hey, here we go. But then, man, going through all that stuff took forever and bagging and boarding everything. But it was like the thrill of the hunt. It's like,
Yeah,
what key issue am I going to pull out next?
yeah, absolutely. That sounds like a blast, yeah.
Yeah, it was great. So, want to switch gears a little bit and talk a little bit about the podcast that you do you co-host that? Do you have a group of you guys on there?
No, it's just one other guy, his name is
Okay.
JP. On Instagram, he's JP's Nerd Cave. He was actually the first comic book friend I made, online, just via Instagram. He messaged me randomly one day, like, because I had started my Instagram feed just thinking like I just started collecting, and I was like, well, I have no one here. None of my friends here are into this kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so I was like, I was like, what can I do to kind of help, you know? And so I was like, oh, maybe I'll just have an Instagram page. And at the time, I didn't even know like comic book was a thing on IG. And I was like, I'll just start. And I started following some shops, and then that led me to other collections. I was like, I'm gonna start my own page.
Yeah.
And then so out of that, JP messaged me one day and was like, hey, we seem to have similar stories, similar
Hmm.
age, like, you know, and just said kind of hi. And so I was like, hey, and then we start from there. Like it blossomed.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So you
Yeah.
guys have all sorts of guests from the industry on there. Obviously, you were just saying that you interviewed the guy from that documentary, and I saw a few of the other guests that you had on. Do you kind of diversify as far as like not always just having artists on, like having other collectors on, stuff like
Yeah.
that?
And you know what I mean? To be perfectly honest, like we really haven't had a ton of artists, just a couple.
Yeah,
But in my, excuse me, in my personal opinion, like I would have anyone in this hobby I'd be willing to have on our podcast, just because I think everyone has a unique story to
yeah, that's how I
tell.
feel too.
And so like I just find that very interesting, and I can talk to most people about that for quite a while. So it's funny because like to be perfectly honest, I do not give a crap about like subscribers or
Yeah,
how many views it gets. Like every once in a while I'll look because JP asked me or something like that.
right, right.
I don't care. Like honestly, like I do it because I enjoy that once a
Yeah,
week that I
it's
sit down
fun,
with
right? Like
somebody.
get to talk to people that love the same things we're
Exactly, and it's
into.
like,
Like,
I think, like, I'm not making this content for other people. Now, if other people wanna enjoy it, all the better, but I'm literally
yeah,
doing this because I enjoy doing it. Um, and so we've had, like, a lot of people. I mean, we've had, like, people like yourself that have their own channel on YouTube or something, or
right,
just people that we've met. Like, we've had all the guys, for example, that we met at Turfacon, and so just anyone and everybody or anybody that has some connection to this hobby, I would be willing and happy to have on the channel. Now, we took a summer break and we've started recording again. And JP does want to try and mix up. So I booked us through like the middle of November. And so from there, what he wants to do. So one thing I appreciate and really enjoy, and I enjoy it specifically with JP because he's a good sport about it, is I love to debate
oh,
and
okay.
discuss. Like I don't want to be in a room where everyone has the same opinion. And I do
Yeah,
think
it
you
gets
do.
it gets
And I do
boring really quick.
Yeah, and I do think you have that happens a lot in this hobby, in the sense that maybe it's not everyone agrees, but no one is willing to like be honest if they don't agree with something.
This
Um,
is gonna be a great segue into my next question I'm gonna
yeah,
ask you.
and so anyway, so JP and I will get into these like kind of not heated, but like we'll get into these debates and we're like
Yeah.
getting after it. And so do you know are you into sports much at all?
I'm familiar, but the main thing I'm into is jujitsu. So,
Okay, well
yeah,
there's
I'm not
a
a huge sports guy, but funny enough, I was on the same path as you with the collecting the sports cards. Though
okay, well
I have like a ridiculous
there's
sports card collection
there's
too.
a very famous sports show called Undisputed, where it's these
Okay.
2 guys, and that they just kinda
Yeah,
go at it over
I've heard
debate,
of it. Yeah,
right? And so Jimmy's like, "We should do it," because, like, again, like, we have this text thread that has all of the guys from Turfacon, for example, but there'll be days where it's like JP and I are just, like, going at it over some topic. And so, like, he was like, "We should try and just come up with topics, and then you and I just debate on camera," and I was like,
yeah,
and while I love the interview, it's like, this also sounds fun to me. So I'm like, yeah, I'm down to pivot. So I haven't
totally.
started booking anyone else because we're gonna try once like the people I had already set. We're just gonna give it a because again, like if it fails, who cares? If it doesn't fail, who cares? Like if it's fun,
Yeah.
I'm down to do it. So
This is the difference. My wife asked me the other day this question. She said, what's the difference between an influencer and a content creator? And I thought about it for a moment and I said, well, a content creator is going to make that content because they enjoy making it and not because they think something's going to come as the result of it. an influencer is trying to do it to gain more influence and get money
There you
and
go.
all these different things. But like, I would consider myself a content creator. You're a content creator, because we're just doing it because we would do it anyway. And if something comes from it, cool, but we're going to keep doing it one way or the other. Right.
Yeah, exactly. Like, again, like, because I will say when we first started the channel, like, I was a little like nervous to like ask people that have larger followings or something like
Yeah.
that. Like, hey, would you come on our show? And they look at like, oh, you guys only have 400 subscribers. Like, well, that's a
Yeah.
waste of my time. But to be perfectly honest, like in this hobby, at least I can't speak for other hobbies.
Yeah.
Almost everybody, no matter the biggest, the smallest,
I'm
doesn't matter,
telling you.
has been
Yeah.
like, sure. Like, yes, there have been one or two people like, you know what, I just don't have the time. I'm sorry. And I'm like, I totally understand that.
Yeah.
Right. But for the most part, everyone's been totally willing, no matter who. I mean, like we had last week, or 2 weeks ago, we had Gem Mint, who's got
Right.
160,000
Yeah.
subscribers. And like, he was like, yeah, I'll come on. Right. And
Yep.
anybody, or like the Fantastic guy, for example, like that was the biggest story in the hobby a year and a half ago. And he was doing interview after interview, like literally the day after his Batman 1 sold for
Hmm.
$1 million, whatever dollars. I literally messaged him on Instagram, and within 30 seconds, he was like, yeah, I'll come on your show.
Yeah.
And so it's like,
Yeah.
it's been great. Like no one looks at our sub count and be like, oh, you're not big enough for me. Or everyone's been
I've
like,
noticed. Yeah. I've
yeah,
noticed the
if the
same
caliber
thing.
works out, we're down.
Yeah, I've noticed the same thing, and I've had like some really big name professionals on, and it's just like, hey, just shoot them a message. If they say no, they say no. But I would say like 98.9% have been down and have come on. So
Yeah.
yeah, it doesn't. I think they can sense the true passion behind it as well, and I think a lot of them have that inside of them as well. So if you're coming from a good place, and and they can see we're having a good time and everything, and I think it makes a difference too, keeping it fun and not having it be just the same pre-canned questions that they probably
Mhm.
get asked 900 times every
Yeah.
time they do an interview. I think that's having it be more like a hangout is a little more appealing
Yeah, and
to
I
some
think,
extent.
like, you and I, like, when we talk to these people, like, we do have a genuine curiosity that leads to, like you said, these questions that aren't the same canned questions that they have to answer every
Yeah.
day, right? And so I think, it works well, and because of that, I guess we'll call it a phenomenon that everyone's been open to come on, like, all the more reason that I even care less about
Yeah,
viewerships or subs, like,
exactly.
again, like, I just enjoy doing this as when you asked me to come on here, it's like, yeah, absolutely. Like, sounds like a great time.
Now I want to switch to a topic that may be somewhat controversial. I don't know that I'll debate you on it. What do you think? What do you make of this whole absolute DC all in thing that they're doing? And what are your thoughts on Absolute Batman? Have you had a chance to check it out?
No, I mean, okay, so I may not have much to say, because to be perfectly honest, I don't get into the modern comic game. Like, I don't have a
Okay.
pull list. I don't read anything modern. Again, I am solely a collector when it comes to comics. Like, uh, it's not that I don't read. I read plenty. I just don't
Hmm.
read comics. So I don't read modern storylines. I know the storylines from back in the day. So my extent of absolute DC is absolute Batman, because that's everywhere.
Right.
I don't love the logo on his chest is basically the extent of what I know.
Okay.
But I've heard it's a
So
fantastic read.
so I'm right there with you. Like, I don't collect and normally read like modern comics as far as like going to a shop and like picking something up. Like, but when let's see, Ghost Machine Productions, when they came out, that's a new company. It's basically like, it gives me the vibes of when I was around when Image first came
Mhm,
out, like
mhm.
a group of really talented creators coming together and starting their own label.
Is there a
So
lot
that
of,
kind
like,
of,
foil covers and stuff too then?
no, nothing like that. But it's like Jeff Johns and
Okay.
like Francis Manipool, Ivan Rice, Gary Frank, like a lot of really top end artists have all gotten together and formed their own universe, like this interconnected universe. And they're publishing under Image, but it's Ghost Machine Productions. So that kind of got me with that same kind of excitement that when the Image guys got together. And so that got me into like looking at some of the newer stuff and actually reading a little bit of it.
Mhm.
And the Ghost Machine stuff's been really cool. So I was like, well, this Absolute Batman thing looks unique. And I was very skeptical. And I'm like, there's no way it's going to live up to the hype. And then I read it and I was like, that was really good.
Oh, nice.
It like surprised me. Like I didn't like the logo, the symbol on his chest either. But in the story, that has a part to play
I figured
in the
there's some
book.
reason it is what it
Yeah.
is.
Yeah.
But
And
yeah,
it's not like chest armor or anything like that, but it does serve a purpose
yeah,
that was pretty unique. And I was like, oh, that was actually really cool.
yeah,
That surprised me. Like to me, it lives up to the hype and it is a pretty good book. So yeah, I was just curious if you had. I know everybody's heard about it because it's
yeah.
kind of
You
all
can't
everybody's
not.
talking about right
And
now,
I
right?
just saw, like, the cover of one of them, maybe it was the first one or something. The OA just sold, and
Yeah.
it either set the record or it's the second highest
Second
modern
highest for
modern
modern.
modern
Yep.
comic,
Second
original art.
highest selling for modern comic original art. Yeah, the
Yeah,
cover. Yeah, the artist is really good. And yeah, it very much surprised me. It was not a I went in very skeptical and with very low expectations. So it ended up being pretty cool. I think it brings back that feeling that we had when we were looking at comic books in the 90s and that
mhm,
excitement and the big action and stuff like that. So I think one of the reasons it's been so successful is giving guys in our age range that same feeling we had when we were collecting comics back in the day.
yeah.
So that's kind of my take on the Absolute Batman. And I don't know as far as the other books or anything if they're going to be any good, but I'm kind of interested to see where it goes. Did you hear that Jim Lee is working on another Hush Batman that's going to come out
I
next
didn't,
year?
but I'm a huge Jim Lee fan. I mean, who couldn't be a Jim Lee fan if you grew up in the
Yeah.
'90s? So, and I love his Batman. Like, so I would love to see it.
Yeah, supposedly he's been working on it a few years, kind of behind the scenes. And so he's kind of doing like what Silvestri was doing with his Batman thing. You know, Silvestri was showing people pages from that Deadly Duo book like 10 years ago. That's how long he's been putting that thing together, and it just came out not too long ago. So I think Jim's kind of like got the ace up his sleeve and is like, okay, Mark did his thing. Now I'm going to come out and show him up.
I mean, you gotta imagine, like, where does that guy have the time being like president of DC and doing all like,
Yeah, I
yeah.
don't know, man. Yeah, when he like, I love watching him draw on his Twitch streams and everything.
I haven't watched this. I don't even know how to get on Twitch, but like I have watched a number of his just like YouTube videos. Like,
Yeah, people
yeah,
repost the Twitch stuff. They'll
yeah,
re-upload them on YouTube. So yeah, it's insane to watch
yeah.
him
I
work.
I do think it's funny. Like, so recently, do you remember there was that news came out? It was like Jim Lee for the first time ever has opened up his commission list,
Yeah,
and people were like, I can't believe he's charging
I
this
know.
amount of money. And I'm like, guys, here's the thing. Jim Lee doesn't need your commission. Like, and
Exactly.
so if he's gonna take the time to do it, he's gonna make it worth his time when you think all the things he's got on his plate.
Yeah,
And I get it. 99% of us can't afford it. But for those that can partake, and
yeah.
Jim Lee, as far as I'm concerned, has earned the right to put his price wherever he wants to put his
Oh,
price.
100%, man. Like above and beyond, like 10 times over, he's earned
Yeah,
that right. So, yeah, it's just people that are upset they can't afford it,
yeah.
and I get it. I get it. I would love, man, it was a double-edged sword, because Ryan Otley and I, we kind of built a camaraderie over the years, seeing each other at cons and me buying original art and buying commissions from him and stuff. And I was very happy for him when he went over to Marvel and started on Spider-Man and stuff. But at the same time, inside, I was bummed because I'm like, I'm not going to be able to
Yeah,
afford any of his
he's gonna say
Spider-Man
no.
pages. I'm not going to be able to afford any of his Spider-Man stuff. Any page with Spider-Man on it was like over $1,000. It
Yeah,
was like price of a cover on other stuff. So I'm
yeah,
like, dang it.
yeah, no
But
doubt.
happy for him though. But I'm like,
Yeah,
man, well,
absolutely.
I guess I got in good on the
Yeah, I mean,
before,
it sounds like
you know.
you've got some gold back there, so
Yeah, I got some gold and funny enough, I have three bust commissions from him,
Nice.
and I got Spider-Man on him from a couple years before he got announced being on Spider-Man,
Oh,
and
nice.
then I got a Hulk one from him before
Oh,
not too long that he ended up on Hulk. Yeah, so I have an old man Logan one, but I doubt he'll. I don't know.
I
He
was
he
like,
told me he's actually working on a like a creator owned thing right now.
oh, cool, cool.
Yeah,
I always like to tell, like, when I met him. So I started this sketchbook, and so I just could like get con sketches from these guys.
yeah.
And at the time he was only at the show I saw him at, which was SummerCon this last year. I don't know if you've gone to that one in Puyallup.
I went to SummerCon. Yeah, I
Yeah.
actually I felt like a loser because normally I'm up to date on when all the cons are,
Uh,
and he actually messaged me and he goes, "Hey," he's like, "You live in Washington, don't you?" He's like, "I'm gonna be at this thing. Are you gonna come?" And I'm like, "Well, now that I know it's there
yeah.
and when it is, and that you're gonna be there, yeah, I'll be there."
Yeah. And so he was only doing Spider-Man, Hulk, and Invincible were the three
Yep.
options. So I picked Invincible, and he's like, start about to draw. He's like, he looks at me, he goes, "Do you want blood on this?" And I was just like, duh.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that
So
was one of the most violent comic books out there.
yeah.
And Ryan loves drawing like gore and all of that stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
No.
remember way back in the days, there used to be a forum for aspiring artists called Digital Webbing, and it had like he was on there, Ryan Stegman was on there, like a lot of these guys. Like I was interacting with them back way before they ever broke in and stuff. Just posting our artwork on there and all that kind of stuff. So it was cool to see like the evolution, but like the essence of Ryan's style, like he's been doing that for like 20 years. Like
Oh,
the
that's
stuff he
cool.
had on there was very much along those lines, but seeing how his styles evolved and he can do like insane like graphite rendering, like fully rendered pencil drawings and portraits. He's so dang talented, but he's got that style that he kind of the cartoony but somewhat realistic anatomy, and that's kind of the style I'm drawn to. It's probably why I like Jack Kirby too.
Hmm.
It's like not perfectly realistic, but there are elements of it that are just
Yeah,
captivating, right?
I tell people like this all the time. Like, I don't get me wrong, like Alex Ross is obviously incredibly talented.
Yes.
That it's not for me.
Yeah,
Like,
same here. I
I
have a
like
great appreciation for it,
agreed.
but yeah,
It's just not. I like you're saying. Like, I like that comic book art, especially like that vintage comic book kind of aesthetic. That's why I love Jack Kirby is obviously the pinnacle of that, and like I
yeah.
love that aesthetic. Like, that's what I like.
What are some of your prized Kirby books or ones that you would add to your very selective collection?
Yeah, I mean, so this year has been a good year. So the last book I got, the last two of the last three are big Kirby ones. So I got an FF5,
Nice.
so first Doctor Doom, and then I got an X-Men 1.
Very
And
cool.
so the next book I'm targeting is FF1. So
That's a
all
big one.
yeah,
Yeah.
so all Kirby-esque. I got an FF12 this year as well, which is Kirby. That's my favorite Kirby covers. So I have FF49. Again, Silver Surfer is my favorite, so
Yeah.
that's
Silver
obviously.
Surfer is amazing.
So FF49 is my all-time favorite Kirby cover. And then I would say probably my second favorite Kirby cover is FF12. So that was another book I got this year.
Awesome. And I meant to ask you, are you the books that you add to your collection, are they raw or graded?
So I have, I mean, I would say I probably of the 40 books I have, it's a little under 40. So let's just say 40. I would say about 30 of them are raw and
Okay.
10 of them are graded. For me, my personal opinion is I will buy whichever I find that has the value I'm looking for. Now,
Yeah.
when I buy something like an X-Men 1 or an FF5, those are graded, and I do appreciate the what's the word I'm looking for? Like the validity that you get with it, that when it
Yeah.
is graded, like I know it's not has any doesn't have any restoration, it's complete, et cetera, et cetera. That being said, I would buy those raw if the opportunity presented itself at the price that worked, and I knew and trusted the person I was
Right.
getting it from. I would not
Yeah.
buy that like off of like I wouldn't buy it off Craigslist
No.
or eBay raw like without knowing. So, but like there are definitely a few people that I've gotten books from that I would absolutely trust if it came across that it got by, came out raw, and the the opportunity was right. I would.
Do you find that you've kind of found a good community of people that you do trust buying, your books from? Like, I've only gotten burned once, and it was only like for $30,
Mhm.
so it wasn't like a big one. But I always, there's horror stories out there
Yeah,
of people
absolutely.
trying to pick up big books, online and then getting shafted on them.
Yeah, I am a firm believer, and I will tell anyone that if you are a comic book collector, there is no better place to acquire comic books, whether it be via trade or purchase, than on Instagram. And what I really appreciate about Instagram acquisition is everyone I've gotten books from, I have built somewhat of a relationship with, in the sense that, like, even before I bought from them, I've for some reason or another, I've messaged them and talked about certain things I'm looking for or whatever. And so Instagram has facilitated that ability to
Nice.
build that relationship. And then like that's worked out into getting better deals and things of that nature. So I personally think like with the idea of buying a book, like now, obviously when I first started, I was using eBay. The
Hmm.
idea of like buying a book now and then paying tax, paying shipping, like
Yeah,
no, it's so much easier uh, and more affordable. And again, the experience is warmer. Um, I know, especially for the people that I've bought from, that I know it's going to be packed well. I don't have to worry about that. So that yes, I mean that is kind of that's the only
that's
play.
good.
Like unless it's like I mean just like an absolutely absurd deal, I don't even look anywhere
Yeah.
else for books.
Yeah, I got all like a lot of my really good deals were via Instagram. The one where I got burned was on Instagram, but I should have known better. Like the way the guy talked, I should have known that there were some red flags, we'll just say, like to where I
Yeah,
was like,
no, and I mean,
you know,
there are definitely. That is not to say that there are not scammers on Instagram.
I
I
would
mean,
say listen to your gut because I
yeah,
didn't listen to my gut and my gut was right. So,
and
yeah.
another thing too that's very cool with the community on Instagram is like when someone sniffs one out, they get blown up,
Yep,
and
this guy did. He
yeah,
got he got really upset, but I gave him every chance to make it right, and he never never came through, and he was making up a bunch of stuff, and so I put him on blast, and everybody went after him.
yeah,
But
good,
he ended up being a dude who's done this a lot, and just he'll few months from now he'll start another account under a different name and do the same thing to people. But thankfully it was like a $30 book and not like because he had some on there that looked way too good to be true, which
hmm
I'm sure they were, that were like in the thousands. So yeah,
yeah, yeah,
trust your instincts, right?
100%. And I mean, and never be afraid to ask, whether that
Yeah,
be ask them personally for references or, if you've made friends on Instagram, like I've had a number of people, hey, have you bought from this guy?
yeah,
The answer could be yes, or it could even be, there's oftentimes I've said like, I personally haven't bought from him, but I know for a fact he's a reputable dealer and I
yeah.
know multiple people that have bought from him, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, that's what I did. After that occurred, anytime I looked at something, then I would see who was following them, and it was people that I trusted. And then I reach out to them. Hey, have you bought from this person before? Oh yeah, he's great. Okay,
Mhm.
cool. You got the seal of approval on there.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Well, I want to wrap it up with letting everybody know where they can find the podcast that you do and where they can follow you on Instagram. I know the answers to these things, but I play dumb and I let the guest let
Yeah, no,
everybody know.
we do the same thing on our,
Yeah,
so
and then I'll
yeah.
make sure to put that in the notes of the podcast as well, so everybody can check you guys out.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, again, and I appreciate you inviting me on here.
My pleasure,
Um,
man.
yeah, so on Instagram, I'm back in the game, which is all in one word, and then underscore comics. And I'll tell you, like, if you want to talk comics, hit me up. I love talking to anybody and everybody on there. I also love helping people find books again, because as I mentioned, right, when I'm only buying a handful of books a year or getting a handful of books a year, like
Yeah.
I do miss the hunt of getting something every week or something like
Right.
that. So like
Right.
I've had a number of people like, hey, if you see this, like by all means, if that's all you want to talk about, shoot me a list. I'll help you find them. Like I love doing that kind of thing.
Awesome.
And then on Instagram, sorry, on YouTube, we are Absolute Game of Nerds. Me and JP are on there. Again, you'll see most of the content is interview format. That should be. We're going to give this debate style thing a
I'm looking
run.
forward to seeing
That'll probably
that.
start in like either late November or early December. But yeah, lots of fun. Just awesome guests.
And
Similar to the kind that you've had on your show.
you guys do that weekly, right?
Yeah, we usually record on Wednesdays. So like we're recording tomorrow.
Nice.
And then they usually debut 2 Mondays after is usually how it rolls. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, and I noticed like you guys have a lot of episodes out already. I
Yeah.
think
So
I
I
saw
mean,
like episode 80 or
yeah. So
something on
Gem
there.
Mint was 80, and then last week we recorded 81 with Tessa is a nerd.
Oh, I tried reaching out to her to get her on here, but Instagram filters messages a
Oh
lot of
yeah, yeah,
times, so I'm gonna try hitting her up again because I follow her on there, and I think she'd be an awesome guest to have
yeah.
on here.
Um, yeah, exactly. Yeah, so like so tomorrow we're recording 82. So we're coming up. So this December will be 2 years since we started the
That's
podcast.
awesome.
Yeah.
And you guys are still having fun.
Yeah.
Hopefully the relationship remains strong
No,
after the
right.
debates begin.
Exactly. But I mean, like again, like going back to like when we met for the first time this summer after almost 2 years of doing this together. Like, I mean, it was like we bet in person for the whole
Yeah.
time, and yeah, that's the thing, right? Like, if you don't see episodes, like I mean, we did take a break for the summer. We'll probably take another break this coming summer. Like, we both have families and things like that.
Yeah.
Um, if the show stops, the reason will be 100%. We got to a point where it's like it's not
Yeah.
enjoyable anymore. Um,
Right.
so, but I mean, right now, still loving it, still having a good time, and so we're gonna keep rocking.
Very cool. So I want to encourage everybody to go check you out. I want to encourage everybody to check out the YouTube version of this podcast, youtube.com/@nerdy musings. Musings is MEWZINGS. You can also find us on any audio podcast platform of your choosing. And I just want to thank you, Rohan, for being on here with me tonight. Hang out with me for a moment. I'm going to hit my outro. We'll groove out to this music and hope to have you on here again in the near
Yeah,
future.
anytime, man. I'm always down. Thanks for having me on. Appreciate you asking me on.
Awesome, man. All right, everybody. Keep it nerdy.
Peace.